Oh, look at that boomboxing fool. Having fun playing the space chicken.
Pow, let's slap some bosses. Gonna do some sick bursts.
He's definitely having fun.
I slap surges and starfalls and cast while moving, all while being a fat chicken. This is awesome.
Too much fun. Let's balance the balance.
Oh, 9.1 changes. Let's see. No. No.
Now let's buff the spec a bit so they don't start playing Final Fantasy XIV.
Alright, it's not the end of the world, you naysayers. And do you know why? Because if you subscribe and enable those notifications, there's always a brighter tomorrow. For us, for you, I mean you, dear viewer, goddamn, we love you. But really now, it does help the video reach more people if you like it, and by subbing and belling, you essentially get more of our videos in your inbox and even our stream announcements, so thanks, like a lot. And back to our regular post-apocalyptic video. Not really. Listen guys, balance is not going to be bad in 9.1. If anything, balance is looking pretty good still in the new patch. So let's first see what has changed. Currently, boomies have received 2 iterations of changes, a major nerf followed by a minor buff. First of all, balance of all things has been nerfed to now offer 24% crit chance upfront with 3% decaying every 1 second. Previously, the legendary started with 40% crit with 8% decaying every second. This would mean that on the 3rd second mark, the 2 would eventually become equal in the amount of crit you would get, while on the second half of the eclipse, the 24% version would give you more crit by the time it would finish its duration. This is undeniably a nerf, and testing is still being done to see how viable it will remain in the new raid. So far, the general impression is that it will still be good for Night Fae, but likely unplayable for the rest. First, New Moon and Half Moon, or rather the New Moon talent, has had its damage buffed by 33% and has had its recharge time shortened from 25 seconds to 20 seconds. This talent was a pretty dead talent for the last couple of years, essentially ever since it came into the game as a talent after Legion. The buffs are looking to make it an attractive and hopefully a competitive choice, and they go hand in hand with the Solstice nerf to what the current version sees shooting stars proc 250% more often, down from 300%. This was the cookie cutter option for Shadowlands so far. After it was taken down to 200% and was deemed dead, the devs bumped it to a compromise of 250%. How competitive is it with New Moon? Hard to say without the ability to run consistent sims. All we know is that prior to its and New Moon's second buff, that brought them to where they are now, Fury of Elune would have been the default. It's likely this talent row will become balanced, and would make for an interesting change since almost all druid specs have had their last row pretty cookie cutter for the last few years. And now to the killer, the bomb, the asteroid that crashed into the bombastically boomboxing Boomies planet, Stellar Drift. This baby has been shot and beaten to death so hard you wouldn't have had time this entire drought of the patch to dig it out of the ground. The problem with it is that it affects Starfall, the only AoE spender of your astral power. Starfall already was iffy with the fact that it consumed less astral power compared to how much you would generate through simply playing in AoE, and you couldn't stack it by casting multiple back-to-back during their own duration window. Hence, the AoE spender was pretty nailed to the floor regardless of how good you are at generating astral power. On top of it still not being stackable, it now has a 12-second cooldown while still letting you cast while moving, but now also increases the damage of Starfall by 50%. The live version extends the duration of Starfall by 2 seconds and only buffs its damage by 15%, but has no cooldown. Now you may think that the cooldown can be offset by the damage buff it received. You would be wrong. First of all, Starfall was already in an iffy place regardless of damage. As mentioned just a while ago, it doesn't feel good to know you can generate so much astral power in AoE, but your damage is limited since casting Starfall, while another one is active, does not stack its damage. While you have specs in the game like Fire Mage with Flame Strike or Destrolox with Rain of Fire, AoE both can stack. Although Fire Mage's Flame Strike is instant, the Ignite debuff it leaves behind stacks. This is an argument about fun and the rotation feeling like it makes sense, because otherwise you end up in a world like Frost Decay, who has no baseline way to spend its resource in AoE and either has to talent into a cookie cutter build or have its single target priority damage so high that it doesn't matter that its AoE sucks. That would mean that in the current design direction, Starfall will end up dealing massive damage, but you cannot maintain its uptime based on your astral power generation rate. So while it's cooling off, you fire Star Surges since you cannot even reapply it anymore with it having a cooldown. Starfall already lasts 10 seconds on live with the current version of the talent 8 baseline. Even with the extension, there still is downtime, and even so you generate more than 50 astral power within 8 or even 10 seconds. So you are left shooting Star Surges in AoE. Kind of reminds me of old Legion Arms Warrior, I think, where you used Whirlwind in single target. Just doesn't make sense, and I hope the design of the talent doesn't stop here. I say lower the damage of Starfall baseline, let it stack, and make Stellar Drift let you cast while moving for 6 seconds or 4 seconds even, because with the PTR design, supposing you would cast Starfall on cooldown, you would be able to cast while moving only 75% of the time. I don't know. Let's move on to the new legendaries. For the Kyrian legendary Kindred Affinity, now the bonded targets will have a bonus to their stat based on their covenant. Kyrians get Mastery, Night Fae Haste, Venthyr Crit, and Necrolord gets Versatility. 5% of each, it seems, or a flat amount since it's not very clear from the current data mined information as long as Mastery is concerned, since not all specs get the same amount of percentage Mastery. Either way, this seems like a passive, set and forget effect, does not alter the ability in any way, and at best might alter your target based on what buffs works for each spec. This seems like an incredibly boring legendary. The effect is literally basic trinket effect, the likes of which we have in the current expansion even, an alternating stat buff based on an external factor. You could say it's worse than the trinket as well, Mistcolor Ocarina for anyone who doesn't know, or even Unbound Changeling, since at least with these, you can actively alter the change and buff you get based on your preferences, and it isn't locked into your covenant. This just seems like a waste at making the covenant ability half decent or interesting. Too bad, and I don't particularly like making this point, but it's just lazy design. For the Night Fae though, Celestial Spirits reduces the cooldown of Convoke to 1 minute, makes it cast exceptional spells more often, but its duration is halved and cast half as many spells. Overall, this could see a buff to Convoke, since over the course of 2 minutes, you popping this twice, you still cast 16 total spells, this time with an increased chance of exceptional spells, aka New Moon, aka more single target damage. But this will have to take the spot of Balance of all things. Is it enough though? The Necrolords is also, well, underwhelming. Unbridled Swarm makes Adaptive Swarm have a 30% chance to split into 2 swarms each time it jumps, giving you almost an extra Adaptive Swarm for 1 cast. Now, the effect on this can be misleading. From its tooltip, we can deduct that when it splits with the same amount of remaining charges. Hence, if you pop an Adaptive Swarm and it splits with 2 remaining jumps, then you have 2 swarms each with 2 jumps. If the internal split proc can proc off of an already split swarm, then you could have this scale a bit more in AoE. But at the same time, what does it do? It increases dot damage. We already know the value of heavy dot reliance for a damage profile from Affliction Warlock, what the history of the spec's performance has been in Mythic Plus, assuming that this target for this legendary is Mythic Plus, and the result of its design into Malefic Rapture that sees it provide a damage profile ignoring the duration of dots and only using the raw number of them for its output. Hence, dot classes in AoE that have to manually apply dots and ramp up have hardly seen not only a good performance, but the playstyles have left mostly a cumbersome feeling. Or is it just me? And lastly, the possibly good news. Sinful Hysteria is the Venthyr legendary that will make Ravenous Frenzy's duration increase each time you apply a stack of its buff. There doesn't seem to be a cap for the buff, meaning this could scale to some crazy numbers. With its already existing 3 minutes cooldown and 20 seconds duration, Frenzy aligns perfect with Celestial alignment, turning Chicken into a 3-minute burst caster for its damage profile. A stark difference from the potential 1 minute of Night Fae and looking to be the Covenant to go for in raiding. I already liked the concept of Frenzy and personally thought Frenzy would be the default for Boomy and Cat while in the beta for Shadowlands. Looks like now it can actually be true. As to what the numbers will eventually turn into, the tunings are still being done. Currently, Balance sits comfortably close to the top of the meta in both raiding and dungeon scenarios. In raiding, as of this research, it's the best performing spec overall and likely to remain fairly strong in Sanctum of Domination. Balance's speciality sees it heavily revolve around single target burst damage. Whether it's a 2-minute damage profile spec with the baseline convoke we have on live servers, to the potential 1 minute on PTR, or even 3 minutes with Venthyr, unless the baseline damage isn't nerfed too much, Balance will still be valuable for any raid team. Obviously, this is from a general perspective. Same thing with Mythic Plus, although Boomkin's value in dungeons comes a lot more from its utility kit, which has nothing to do with how numbers are tuned. Of course numbers matter, but unless Boomkin gets the sub-rogue treatment, I'm sorry rogues, it will still perform above average in high keys. It's unlikely anyone can predict the world first meta right at this moment, MDI considered as well. And when speaking of the best, if Balance is a few percentages behind 1 or 2 other specs, it's likely it will see less play at the echelon of raiding. We are also heroic level raiders, so for advanced opinions on the top of the meta performance, the Dreamgrove community and content creators like Naguura, Tettles, and such are a more likely source of relevant information, and we highly recommend you guys check them out, and the links will be in the description. Thank you very much for Naguura for also giving us a little bit of insight of how Balance goes, although this video is strictly from our point of view. We also appreciate Naguura for letting us use her footage a little bit since she has been playing Balance in the PTR testing Sanctum of Domination. Thank you very much. And you should definitely check her channel because she has some funny Boomkin videos. Either way, until 9.1 hits live servers, and even after that, until Sanctum opens, anything can happen. Take all of this with a grain of salt. This is strictly the opinion of a player that dabbles into all specs at an average level. There is more that goes into making a spec perform than what a tooltip of a spell would indicate. Thank you to the patrons for supporting our channel time and time again. This is definitely not another class guide because there's really not much to say for class guides at the end of the patch, but we are looking into more PTR content and updates for future videos for classes and specs. And that's what you will be supporting, dear viewer. If you want to give a little bit more, if you want to help us a little bit more, the links to our Patreon page are down below. And of course, you will be supporting our streams, you'll be supporting our MoCast, our tier list, and so much more. Thank you for watching the video, and see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.